This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
Hello, Danger Dogs. Thank you for supporting Serious Danger, the podcast about green politics in so-called Australia. I'm Tom Ballard, joining you from Goodnich Mara country. With me is my co-host, friend, personal hero, and someone I'd like to blow up a pipeline with one day, Emerald Moon. Hello.
Hello, I'm Emerald Moon. I am in Mansion on Yagara and Turrbal country, and that's right, Danger Dogs. We are getting seriously dangerous this week, entering the seriously dangerous cinematic universe, watching the feature film How to Blow Up a Pipeline, released in 2022, based on the book by Andreas Malm. Do you think that's correct pronunciation? I don't know. Is he Swedish?
Malm. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Malm. His book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline.
It's a great film, and we're going to have a great conversation about it. We want to remind you that you should come along to our live shows, please, in New South Wales. Our Newcastle show is sold out, as we probably know. But if you're not coming to the show, you should still come to the People's Blockade, and maybe you should do something dangerous, like take some direct action, even though it's very naughty. Maybe don't blow up a ship or anything because there's some people on there, but get in the way of the coal infrastructure there because the planet's on fire. That'd be great. Our show's on Saturday, November the 23rd there. The next day, we're in Sydney at the Vanguard at 1:30 p.m. there. Our guest is Mark Humphreys. There are still some tickets left to that show. Just go to seriousdangerpod.com to book your tickets. We would love to see you there live
with exclusive merchandise, if that's something that you like. Hats, bags, stickers. Come along.
Hell yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Boom Talk. Today, teaching myself to make a homemade blasting cap. And if this works, it'll be step one in making our own improvised explosive.
Might be headed to Texas for the winter. What's in Texas? Just a project. What kind of project?
Try to stop a pipeline from being built on my property. Poisons the air, water.
Damn, this place is sick. You guys cooking meth in here?
You ready to start working?
We have to show how vulnerable the oil industry is by hitting something big.
Michael, what do you think the odds are we blow ourselves up?
I don't really care.
We could blow the pipe at the hilltop, keep the oil from leaking.
You're not actually thinking.
I'm not thinking about it. I'm doing it.
What if y'all do structural damage?
Structural damage is kind of the point.
This is destruction of federal property. Terrorism.
American Empire calls us terrorists, then we're doing something right.
If you're seeing this, let those who profit from mass death know their properties will be trashed.
3, 2, 1.
They will defame us and claim this was violence or vandalism, but this was justified. This was an act of self-defense.
This summer.
Let's talk about this movie. How to Blow Up a Pipeline was released in 2022. It was directed by Daniel Goldhaber, who co-wrote the screenplay with Ariella Barra, who also plays one of the lead roles, and Jordan Sjol. Wow, we are butchering names.
This is really testing our pronunciation.
How would you pronounce Jordan? Sjol. How would you do it?
Sjol. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know.
Wouldn't butcher it. So we thought we'd talk about this. This film is, I've been wanting to see it ever since I first heard about it. It is available on Stan. If you happen to have Stan, we're not supported by Stan. We're not getting paid by Stan. We're just letting you know that if you have Stan,
if you're listening, Stan.
This could be the first in a series of all the other leftist radical movies that they have available to stream on the Fairfax 9 platform. But yes, check it out if you haven't already. And obviously, we're going to be talking about some disclaimers. So if you haven't already seen the movie and you want to watch it before you listen to this, that's totally fine. But also maybe you want to listen to it and it'll make you want to go and watch it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's based on this book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Learning to Fight in a World on Fire. I thought that Emerald had read it. Emerald thought that I had read it. Neither of us read this fucking book.
We haven't read the book. Sorry, we haven't read the book, okay? We're just going to say it. We haven't. We watched the movie.
Yeah. We waited for the movie to come out. We're those kind of people. But it was quite a big deal. I remember it was in non-fiction circles, published by Verso Books, and Verso always publishes interesting leftist radical thinkers, I think. Like generally they're putting out some interesting ideas. Sometimes they're ideas like abolish the family, and I'm a bit like, oh, okay. And other times they're cool things like this. In the book, Mum argues that sabotage is a logical form of climate activism and criticizes both pacifism within the climate movement and climate fatalism outside it. The book asks the question, when do we start physically attacking the things that consume our planet and destroy them with our own hands? You'd heard a bit about the book, Emerald, is that right?
Yeah. I was dating someone at the time that it came out who was reading it. And so I have been in the vicinity of someone reading it, if that helps, not having read it myself. But yes, I remember him saying that he enjoyed it and he thought it was very compelling and it made him want to blow up a pipeline.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good news. I mean, we should say from the outset, the book is, non-fiction, and it is really like, a long essay or a political book in which Malm is talking, directly to the reader. There's no narrative, whereas the film goes in a very different direction, which we'll get to in a moment.
Well, and crucially,
the basic argument
crucially, you might be confused if you hadn't read the book, like us, by the title being How to Blow Up an Oil Pipeline. It's not actually an instruction manual in the theme of, it's not like the anarchist cookbook of 2021 or whenever it came out. It is more like it's a persuasive kind of essay style. It's a rhetorical piece, making the case for direct action.
Yes, some critics were saying it should really be called Why to Blow Up an Oil Pipeline, because it's really wrestling with the moral claims around that, or the moral argument around whether it's justified in doing this. In the second chapter of the book, Malm states that the ruling class will not implement sufficient change to address climate change, and that the climate movement should sabotage devices that produce CO2 emissions in order to discourage new investment in them. Which I thought was kind of interesting too. It's like, it's both symbolic, an act of like blowing up a pipeline to create a level of fear, uncertainty around investment. In the film, as we've discussed, they're talking about, shooting up the price of oil as well. So I guess it's about both the impacts of the actual acts themselves, but also creating an environment in which, I guess, raising the risk of investing in fossil fuel infrastructure, right?
Which is often, yes, it's also an argument I would say used by like market force style campaigners who are like, I might be leveraging kind of community pressure or market forces to attack a particular project and undermine its financial basis. But in doing so, I'm also sending a message to future projects that it will be incredibly difficult for you to go ahead.
Right. Okay.
Which is undermining like social license and feasibility.
Sure, which has a relationship to the divestment movement, which also appears briefly in the film, right? That idea of, creating, using financial instruments to raise the risk and create uncertainty in investing in fossil fuels, I mean, but at one point, Malm was pretty direct. He calls on people to damage and destroy CO2 emitting devices, put them out of commission, pick them apart, demolish them, burn them, blow them up. Let the capitalists who keep on investing in the fire know that their properties will be trashed. Ooh, it sounds like a great book.
Edgy. Does sound good. Wait, someone should read it. I've watched the film now, so I don't know.
I get it. I think just before we get to the film, it's worth saying that, of course, yes, when it was released, there was all the expected controversy and hand-wringing from both conservative reviewers and also liberals sort of saying, oh, what are we doing here? A regular feature was this idea of like, what if it wasn't blowing up an oil pipeline? What if you're blowing up something else? Like one critic was like, how would everyone be reacting if we were saying a book released called How to Blow Up an Abortion Clinic? Do you ever think about that?
No, they didn't draw that equivalence.
They genuinely did.
Tom,
And
that
even
is
further than
so
that,
silly.
Jesse Klein in the National Post wrote, he criticized the film's perceived attempt to normalize terrorism. He questioned the positive reception given by critics and raised the potential controversy if a similar approach were applied to justifying the actions of Islamist terrorists in a film titled How to Fly Planes into a Building.
Sounds like a great film. Watched it on YouTube, actually. Yeah.
There were heaps of
Yeah,
films
I think
about
I've seen it. It's called
9/11.
Loose Change.
Whoa, you got it. But I mean, isn't that the classic liberal critique of like, what if this thing was just fundamentally different and done for completely different reasons and murdered people and was just like a completely different set of circumstances? Like,
Yeah.
what would you do there?
What if it was completely different? Yeah, how would you feel? Probably completely different, I guess.
Gotcha. For his part, Mum, the author, characterizes property destruction as a type of violence, but states that we must insist on it being different in kind from the violence that hits a human or an animal in the face, subsequently arguing that violence which hits material conditions necessary for subsistence should be considered violence against people. So again, having not read the book, it's clear that there's a nuanced argument going on here with lots of different caveats. But I guess it's interesting. Like, do you consider property destruction to be a form of violence? I guess so.
It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I don't know that I do. But I can understand, yes, like that it's not a hard and fast, I think, argument to make, because I'm sure that there are many people who would argue that instilling fear or, invoking fear in people is a type of violence. I think it's interesting that Malm is specifically saying effectively that, like, if your property damage results in, I guess, economic loss to the extent that people can't afford to eat, can't afford to live, that's a form of violence. So that's an interesting element that I hadn't really heard about. And they do go into it briefly in the film. We'll get into. There's these kind of really brief bits of dialogue where it's almost like they're condensing what I imagine are chapters in the book. I haven't read it, into like a few sentences, and they briefly touch on that. Like, they're like, well, what about the people who are affected? Like, it'll be, the working class who are hardest hit when you damage this infrastructure upon which their jobs rely effectively.
Yeah, which is obviously something to consider, I think, and would have to be a factor worked into the moral calculus of your certain actions. But as someone in the film says, revolution actions have consequences. Direct action does have consequences, and it can be messy. Just one last point on the book and its kind of impact that it had. I thought this was interesting. The environmental direct action group Tire Extinguishers, who began deflating tires on SUVs in March 2022 as an act of climate protest and are now active in 17 countries, say they were inspired to start their group by how to blow up a pipeline. Malm called the group's actions a form of extremely peaceful and gentle sabotage. Anyone can deflate an SUV. It's virtually child's play. It requires no formal organization, no leadership, no funds, no implements other than bits of gravel or beans or green lentils. Given the infinitely replicable nature of the action, sabotage as meme, its potential for making SUV ownership less convenient and attractive could not be discounted.
Right.
Are you a fan of the tire extinguishers out there?
Well, you know what's funny? I would think that I wouldn't be, and yet I kind of am, because it's so, like, it's direct. It doesn't really harm anyone in any significant way. Clear message. And as he says, like, very doable, eminently achievable. But what do you think of general, have we talked about this before? Like, anti-gas guzzler discourse on the spectrum of, like, anti-car discourse more generally?
Well, I think that, SUVs in particular, these cars that we see in our cities and suburbs, they are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they do materially impact the lives of your fellow citizens. And I think anything that raises questions about what we consume and production and the social impact of, like, our individual consumer choices, I think is, like, probably pretty good. And SUVs are such an egregious example of how completely unnecessary those vehicles are and how ridiculous it is that people own them. So challenging people and making people reconsider that decision is probably a pretty good thing.
But of course, it's, the argument could be made in a similar way that an argument is often made about protests like what XR would do, where it's like, well, if you're just targeting everyday people, you're going to turn off more people than you recruit, like you're going to piss everyone off and then turn people off the climate cause, and which I think is usually a bad faith argument. I don't know. I don't know if there is merit to that. I don't know. But I think the more important argument, or the more salient one, is, well, do you really have the right target there? When it seems as though the key message of how to blow up an oil pipeline is around directly sabotaging the capital, the infrastructure, and the big corporations rather than the consumers, which I think is a big difference between, the way that those like road blocking or like disrupting business as usual, mass protest, Extinction Rebellion things were conceived, as opposed to, blowing up an oil pipeline.
Yeah. See, it's funny because from that quote from Mom, I guess it sounds like he's suggesting that he would like to see it get to a point. It's sort of so easy, so low cost, so accessible for anyone to do, to just slash the tires of any SUV you see. He envisions sort of an activism and a healthy activism society in which SUV owners have their tires slashed so regularly.
Yes.
It's not just like it happens once and they go, oh, these bloody hippies, that's very annoying, and maybe they get on the news and what an outrageous movement. It's just like on a weekly basis, or sort of, people fear leaving their SUVs out on the street because someone is going to slash their tires.
And so when you're shopping for a new car,
raise that cost so much. Yes, right.
Yeah, you go, maybe the risk of getting an SUV is too much. It's too much of a hassle. I won't do it.
And surely at some point the SUV electric car price point must be getting pretty close to each other. Like some of these, I don't know anything about
but
cars
SUVs
really, or about the prices.
Yes, it's not about price, is it? Yeah.
Right. All right. So this film, this guy, Goldhaber, his name is the director. He directed a film previously called Cam. I don't know if you've ever seen this, which was like about, have you seen it? No.
No, but when I was looking up this guy up, I saw that he'd done this film, and it's someone is a streamer and then one day they find themselves replaced in the streaming universe or something.
I think so, yes. Kind of like a psychological thriller set in the Cam world. He was feeling really hopeless. He gets the rights to the book. He adapts it and, yes, makes this choice to make it a completely fictional, sort of tell the story. The philosophy of the book saying that it can be totally justified to go out there and blow up fossil fuel infrastructure. He says, okay, let's actually tell that story about a group of young people getting together and deciding to do that. I mean, did you like the film? I really like the film.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was like, if it wasn't about a message that I really strongly agree with and I value, I probably wouldn't be like, I'm loving this film so much.
Right.
But I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was not a difficult watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's like an hour 40 or something. It's a pretty tense thriller, and I think it's told pretty economically, you'd say, and an interesting way. A few twists and turns, a few flashback stuff. And yes, my political buy-in is obviously a big part of me enjoying the film. I definitely think people listening to this podcast would enjoy the film. But also just the fact that it exists is kind of cool. I mean, it's a very low-budget film. We can safely assume that not heaps of people have seen it. And, it's like an indie kind of thing. But the fact that it is a cool film with some reasonably big names, or names that are on the rise, someone like Lucas Gage is pretty big. He was in The White Lotus. But it's a film that takes radical politics seriously. And I don't think you see them very much at all. Certainly about modern radical politics, like stuff about people from the past, like historicals, like, oh, look at these radicals from the past, weren't they cool? But actually saying, no, people right now taking these kind of more extreme direct actions for the climate's sake, like what's motivating them, telling the messy story and the various arguments on either side of it. I think just based on that alone, I thought it was like pretty cool that it exists.
I think it is impressive. Like, it manages to fit a lot in that it's got a narrative that, as you say, is compelling. It also is going to and it's also trying to make a fairly complex point in that, Andreas Malm wrote a whole book about it. It's trying to make that within this narrative and kind of bring in, in theory, I suppose, like connect with the everyman through the characters and all of that. So you're right. It's trying to do a lot. And I think what's interesting about it is that, yes, it is more instructive. Like, it is more about the how. And I think that some of the kind of, I don't know, cinematic choices in terms of what they would focus on was it was like instructive. Like they would deliberately show you labels of ingredients that were being used in making a bomb, for example. Or
Right.
I think that the way that it's set out did feel as though they were like, remember to think of this if you were thinking of doing something like this. Remember to think of an alibi. Remember, here's how you might, edit the metadata on a CCTV camera to make it look as though you were at this place at a certain time. Here's how you might set a timer so that people can go away and create alibis before the bomb goes off. Here's things that could go wrong, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, true. Yeah, a nice little instruction how to. Do try this at home.
Genuinely, yeah.
What's that?
Looks so easy. Not really. It looked quite hard, actually.
Shall we go through the movie? Sort of like we'll move through what actually happens in the film pretty quickly, and then I think we want to get to like some bigger questions about what it all throws up there, and some incredible IMDb feedback, I think.
Oh yeah. Let's read some reviews, definitely. I mean, it's funny that you talk about obviously what was it called? This movement of letting down tire extinguishers. That makes sense now that there is that link that they say that they were inspired by Andreas Malm's book, because that's how the film opens, and it's Xochitl, who's I would say, I guess, sort of the main character or a leader in a way of this group of people who ultimately set out to, spoiler alert, blow up an oil pipeline in Texas. And yeah, she's slashing tires on SUVs, and then we get this. It's this kind of expositional opening as we get little snippets of each of this diverse cast of characters from all walks of life, and they've all got backstories and reasons why they're coming together to do this project.
Yes, we've got Xochitl. Xochitl was how we figured out how to pronounce that right. Spelt, yeah, pretty interesting. Spelt Xochitl. So yes, we learned about her backstory. Her mum's died in a heat wave, of course, exacerbated by the climate crisis, and is particularly motivated to do something about this. She grew up near an oil refinery with another character named Theo, and she's also connected to another character called is it Sean? Yeah, Sean. I think.
Sean.
Yeah, we both see a clip of them at the Divest movement in their university, I suppose. It's a meeting around with other people, activists who are organizing a rally to call on their university, we presume their college, to divest from fossil fuels.
Look, nobody's saying divestment's going to solve everything, but it is a big step in the right direction.
Which would be great if we still had time, but by the time any market solution does shit, billions of people will be dead from climate disaster.
We all want faster change, but these are huge systems that change incrementally.
Right, so act outside of the system. We need to start attacking the things that are killing us. We can take more drastic action.
Like what?
Like actual sabotage? Property destruction?
Which I thought was like a really, interesting little insight. And Xochitl's just sitting there going, this is going to make a fucking difference. We don't have time for this. We have to do something else. And her comments in that meeting inspire Sean to be like, hey, yeah, actually, I agree with you. Let's fucking do stuff, bro.
Well, and I don't know if you saw this, but later on in the film, at a somewhat, one of the crucial tying threads together kind of reveal moments is when we see Sean in a bookshop reading How to Blow Up an Oil Pipeline when one of the other characters comes up to him and is like, hey, man, what's up?
Cool book. Reading's cool.
Yeah. What if we did that?
Who else we got there? Let's run through some of these other characters.
Yeah. So we've got we've got Michael. Michael is probably the most, I don't know. I think all of the characters were a little bit, and this is one of the criticisms, is you could say that they're somewhat flat in that they're very they're representative characters, relatively simple backstory that you can sum up in a few words. Whereas Michael, I gathered it was mostly that, first of all, he's Indigenous, he has a connection to country, and he's from a mining town, and just seems generally extremely angry about the way that, his town's being fucked over. He starts kind of taking it out on the workers that come there. He ultimately starts making TikToks about building bombs, And it looks as though, I think so, she finds him there through his videos.
Now, was it called Boom Talk or Boom Talk?
Boom
At one point, he's like
Talk.
doing an
I thought
instructional
Boom
video.
Talk.
Right, Boom Talk. Okay, is that a
Yeah.
category on TikTok that would almost certainly be shut down immediately if it posts? I don't know. Maybe people
Surely
love
that's just
posting
what
those
he's
videos.
calling it. He's like, welcome to Boom Talk. Today I'm trying to do this stupid thing with a pipe, you know.
Yeah, but don't you think he's like those videos would be taken down by the Chinese Communist Party or by, I don't know. I've used the F slur during a comedy routine on TikTok, ironically, and it was taken down because it contravened community guidelines. And even though I appealed the decision, they still wouldn't let me post that video.
That's funny.
I
Do you have
took it
to
all the way
submit
to
proof of
Xi
your
Jinping.
homosexuality?
Well, this is it. They like give you options on the basis of which to do your appeal. And none of the options that they gave me matched my thing, which is I'm doing very funny comedy. And so there was an option that just said something else. And I clicked that, and I thought I would write my reason, but it just like submitted the appeal. So that was the basis of my appeal. Something else.
Secret other option.
Good stuff.
So then we've also got Logan and Rowan, who appear to be, I guess, just classic like activist ratbag types. And then at one point we figure out, actually it's fairly early on, that Rowan is an informant, is working with the cops. She's taking photos of all of these people building bombs and texting them to a little cop friend. And so you're like, fuck you, Rowan, you little cop fucking bootlicker, you suck. And you when we eventually get their backstory, we find out these are like poor kids that have kind of, you know, been doing activism for some time. It seems as though they were arrested like spray painting something about dams. I don't know if you caught, I think it was like no new dam protest, something like that. Get picked up by the cops. Mm-hmm. Rowan's like, fuck, what am I going to do? Does a deal with them to become an informant. I mean, do we want to do the reveal? We're spoiling the whole reveal.
Second reveal.
Hold the second reveal. Okay. All right.
We know that she's working for the FBI as an informant. I thought it was also a nice detail that Logan was clearly very wealthy. Like she's like, I don't have your daddy's lawyer to call on. It's like, again, not an untrue representation or reference to the fact that some people in some anarchist activist circles come from very wealthy backgrounds. I thought that was kind of like an interesting complication within the characters.
Yes, exactly. And it did make me even though I still was like, at this point, fuck you for working with the cops, but it made me slightly more sympathetic because it's like, she didn't know what she could do.
Yeah. Dwayne, the Texas farmer as well. So this is like a classic Southern Texan dude who you'd think would normally hate any kind of climate activist. It'd be ridiculous.
What's this guy doing with these rat bags?
Lock the gate kind of vibe.
Lock the gate vibe.
Yes, we find it. We see his backstory. The government used eminent domain to take away some of his family's property that he's been in his family for 100 years in order to build this particular pipeline. And he hates them for it. They tried to challenge it legally. They've got all these legal fees, him and his wife and their very young child. They're under a lot of financial pressure. So he fucking hates these goddamn fossil fuel capitalists.
He's ready to do something about it.
Hippies. He was kind of hot, I'll be honest.
He reminds me of my boyfriend a little bit. He actually, I think, was wearing the same hat. He dresses like my boyfriend. So I was like, okay, I see you. Xochitl's mate, Theo, who Xochitl grew up with near the oil refinery, now has advanced stage leukemia and can't afford the treatment because, I guess, America.
Brilliant.
So that is one bleak element. They throughout the film are like clearly quite sick. And it's I guess the assumption or the conclusion is that this is as a result of growing up near an oil refinery. Apparently that is something that happens.
Yes, that was inspired by a real story that the filmmakers heard in the course of their research. So they included that in there. I mean, I honestly think in Australia, not that this obviously terrible stuff like this does happen in Australia, but I think we often can't appreciate just how cooked a lot of this stuff is, how much more deregulated America can be, and how I don't know, stuff like the three-eyed fish in the Simpsons cartoon, or just the amount of or the Flint, Michigan story, the corporate malfeasance that has just waged misery and poor health outcomes on working class people across America for a very long time. It's horrific, obviously.
That's right. Could be even worse. And then the final character I think that we haven't got to yet is Theo's girlfriend, Alicia, who is basically there in like somewhat reluctant solidarity. Doesn't really want to do it, seems to be pretty worried about the whole thing, and is pissed off when Sochi effectively recruits Theo to do this.
Yep.
But is like, okay, I will come along if you can get me an alibi. Unfortunately, is the one who ends up getting physically hurt in the process, which is, I guess, the irony of it. But yeah, she's just there to support her dying partner, I suppose.
And so they've got this big plan. They're going to go to this rural property. They're going to blow up a pipeline at 2 different areas along the line. They're going to turn off the flow of the oil to make sure they don't spill too much oil. That's very important to Dwayne, of course, because he lives there and he's on that property. And it's sort of, again, I think quite well told from the film's point of view, in that we're not in on the whole plan, kind of like an Ocean's 11 heist film kind of vibe, in which there are elements of the plan that we're sort of following on that we're not fully included in. And it was quite good because they're sort of messy young people, like they're drinking booze.
Yeah.
Logan and Rowan are still doing drugs and stuff, and they don't all get along like brilliantly. Michael's a bit of an asshole.
Yeah.
But they're all united by a common cause and a belief in their righteousness because the fucking planet's on fire.
Yeah.
And these people need to get the goddamn message.
Yeah, they all work together, and it's very nice. And I guess, like I said, there's these like kind of explicit visuals of how they do this, how, as they're heading out to the desert and they're building the bombs and, sorting out their alibis, and they've all got their little jobs and all this sort of thing. And then we get the bits of dialogue that are making the case for this kind of direct action. Particularly there's one where when they're together, they're out in the desert, and this is, I guess, the night before they take the action, and they have this discussion about, well, of course they're going to call us terrorists. Is this terrorism? Do you think we're doing terrorism? Well, they're going to call us terrorism. They always have called this kind of activism terrorism until, we're vindicated in some way.
Answer the question. Do you feel like a terrorist?
Do I feel like a terrorist? Of course I feel like a fucking terrorist. We're blowing up a goddamn pipeline. They're going to call us terrorists.
No, they're going to call us revolutionaries or game changers.
No, they're going to call us terrorists because we're doing terrorism.
Who cares what they call us?
I ain't hurt nobody. Boston Tea Party, they were terrorists of their day. They didn't hurt anybody. Patriots. MLK was called a terrorist. He was on the FBI watch list.
Why, he was like nice.
No. He was freaking ruthless.
I'm sorry. You're trying to equate civil rights movement to what we're doing here?
I mean,
Look,
it's kind of similar.
anytime anyone has challenged authority, they call it terrorism. And then when the terrorism works, they lie about the legacy and they say that it was all passive, nonviolent, kumbaya shit when it's not.
If the American empire calls us terrorists, then we're doing something right.
Fuck yeah. What he said, exactly. People talk shit about me my whole entire life. I don't give a shit.
Jesus was a terrorist. He was a terrorist.
And I guess my question is, do you think that this was effective, or was it too ham-fisted? Like, it was, I think it's difficult to try and put something like this in a film without it feeling a little bit forced and a little bit corny.
Yeah.
But it probably is the kind of conversations that they would be having.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I would argue that people, if they'd got to the point in which they are
at that point,
committed,
maybe not.
At
That's
that point,
true.
like these groups are being like, we all agree with each other and we're here, let's do it. But for the sake of the film, and you see this a lot in plays as well, right? These moments in plays where we need to have the arguments out, and you put the various arguments in the different characters' mouths and sort of see how it works out. And I guess the craft is in how skillfully and believably you can do that. And I do think there are some moments in that chat which are pretty clunky, where people feel like they're saying, some basics, maybe some lines from the book or some very trite arguments being articulated.
They surely must be. We would know if we'd read the book.
And I'll give him a pass on that, because I thought that, like, at least the argument is really interesting and the moral questions around the justification for these actions. But it contrasts to me a lot. I think there was a moment in this movie where it feels really real, and the performances are pretty solid, and we have some real affecting moments when, I don't know, I was really gripped and I was there and I felt like there's real people doing a thing. So those scenes when they're sitting around having philosophical discussions about the nature of terrorism sort of clashed a little bit with that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, then my other question was, what do you think about the idea that you can work with the cops in the way that Rowan did, and it will ultimately work out in your favor? Like, what do you think about this whole plot line?
That was a bit bizarre. Well, I mean,
Realistic?
maybe now's the time to sort of say yes. So we think that Rowan is informing for the cops, the FBI, which he is. And we think she's going to betray the rest of the group and that everyone's going to get arrested. They successfully blow up the 2 parts of the pipeline. That all happens. Then they're on the run. Rowan gets picked up by the cops. She gives them information. And the FBI go to the house in which they base the operations to arrest Sochi and Theo.
Yeah.
But the twist being that Sochi and Theo were totally expecting that.
Yes.
And they planned that. That was part of the plan. They knew that Rowan was an informant, and they were using her connection to send them to the house to be arrested to make a point. Theo obviously doesn't have long to live with her leukemia, so she's got to die pretty soon. She wants this to be her final act. Whereas Sochi is sort of saying, no, I'm prepared to go to jail. I'm prepared to wear the consequences for this action because I believe in this cause so much, and it's my hope and belief that this will inspire others to attack fossil fuel infrastructure because the climate crisis is that serious.
Yes, and I think she also makes the calculation, she says in the film, that maybe their sentences will be more lenient. I suppose Theo might not even serve any time given their condition, but that Sochi might get a more lenient sentence because, quote, they're 2 girls from a refinery town, one with terminal cancer. And it's a fairly sympathetic story. And so that's why it kind of, it makes sense if you're going to pick anyone to be the fall guys, the scapegoats for this, to minimize the spread of consequences for everyone involved. Those two kind of, you can see the logic there.
Yes, and the implication that Rowan is manipulating the FBI to think that they're the only people involved. And so they all get away scot-free, right? So she's covering up the fact that Logan was involved. They don't know anything about Dwayne or Sean or Michael whatsoever. They think it's just Rowan and these 2 girls and 2 women rather, and they're the only ones that face the consequences. She also gets paid. Rowan gets like some cash from the FBI as well.
Well, yes, I was like, that's right. This is a thing in the US. I think that informants get paid cash. It's quite insane. But yeah.
I would have thought. Why?
Message from this film: become an informant.
It'll all work out great.
Talk to cops. Yeah. Of course, it doesn't work out great. Like in the process of this, as I said, Alicia at one point, her leg gets crushed by a barrel. There's Logan, Rowan's partner, is shot. Yes. It's not all great. 2 people end up, in jail or dying in a hospital prison potentially. But I think that's, I suppose the film makes the argument for direct action while acknowledging that it is not easy and there will be consequences. But I think it's still sitting on the side of we have a moral imperative to take action like this and it's worth it.
Yeah. And the argument that this, doing these acts inspires others is justified by the sort of postscript sequence in the film in which we see some people inspired by what Sochi and the others did, blowing up some luxury yachts and leaving a note saying, this is why I destroyed your property. What do they say? Yeah. If the law won't punish you, then we will, I think. Something like that is the final line in that little postscript.
Not the luxury yacht. Do you think are you familiar with the reality TV behemoth, the sprawling Below Deck franchise?
I have heard of Below Deck. I know people enjoy Below Deck very much. I have not watched it myself, no.
Love Below Deck. Is that problematic? Am I not allowed to watch fucking Below Deck anymore? I love Below Deck.
You're allowed to keep loving Below Deck. Whether you watch it or not will take no difference whatsoever. Maybe you should blow up. You can watch a few seasons, but then you got to blow up one of those.
I can watch it and then blow one up. Got it. I think, and I think as well, probably my favorite moment of the film and some of the best acting. I don't know if you felt this way as well, but the moment where they've realized that they've pulled it off and you're kind of seeing in these characters' eyes as they're walking away or they're getting to wherever they need to go next. And it is like such excitement and joy in their faces. I think that really gave me a bit of a buzz. It was like, you can imagine how that would feel, right? After all that planning and like sacrifice, to be like, holy fuck, we did it.
Yeah, sacrifice is the key word. I mean, like, yeah, they do the blow up, and then Sochi is saying goodbye to Sean, and they're like, we did it, and they hug each other. And of course, we as the audience don't realize that that's them sort of saying goodbye, because Sochi knows she's going to go get arrested and potentially spend, 15, 20 years, we're saying, in prison, maybe even longer for this crime. And that to me is like one of the big questions of the whole piece is like, what are you and I, what are we as people who give a shit about this stuff, if we care about the climate crisis, what are we prepared to do? Even if you're like, I totally believe in doing that and I support you 100%. Are you prepared to do it? Are you prepared to go to prison?
Am I going to jail?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I really like not being in jail. It's like one of my favorite things, I have to say.
I'm enjoying not being in jail. Yeah.
It's pretty good out here.
I definitely am. Yeah.
But, are we prepared to back up all our thoughts and feelings and big principles? Are we prepared to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, and the argument, I guess, that you can make is, where are you most useful? If you are more useful doing something outside of prison, then maybe there are other people. But I think that gets into kind of like weird territory, right? Because it's like, some people are just like expendable. They don't have any other skills. They can just go to prison. And obviously, Sochi is incredibly skilled and smart and, a brilliant organizer, has managed to pull this off and is now stuck in prison. But yeah, the implication being that she was able to do it so effectively that perhaps she would inspire a bunch of other little Sochis. I don't know.
Yeah, there are a few arguments running through the film that I think are worth talking about. We mentioned it briefly before. Alicia particularly makes this point of like, okay, who's actually going to bear the cost of this? So they're trying to blow up the pipeline to raise the cost of oil, particularly, like to shoot oil prices up, particularly, and that's particularly relevant in West Texas because I think oil prices are indexed to the price in West Texas. They make a point of making that clear. So, yes, the argument saying, well, shooting up oil prices would increase inflation, which would hit working class people and the poor the hardest across the globe. I think Sochi's response at one point is to say, better than that, then 5 years later, choking on deadly air or something like that, or choke to death in heat. Yes. What do you think?
Choke to death in 5 years, something like pay more for gas now, or choke to death in 5 years is
What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's you could make the argument that it's a little bit, what's the word? It's hyperbole to say you're probably going to choke to death in 5 years, but you may choke to death in 20. I don't know,
I mean, it sort of just keeps coming back to, well, what is the alternative? Like, what are the alternative routes that you would suggest if not taking this kind of direct action? There was a critique in Jacobin called "Don't Blow Up a Pipeline" by Chris Maisano, who's sort of critically taking on this idea in the book. And his article basically lays out all the, positive action that nonviolent organizing and political pressure has resulted in his experience working in New York on particular electoral reforms, which is kind of funny to be reading in the wake of a second Trump presidency as well. And like Trump's already talking about drill baby drill, and of course we shouldn't ban gas in any way whatsoever, and we should frack like crazy motherfuckers. Like, how the hell to do it? What else is to be done? Also, another critique in that piece that I thought was interesting was this. The United States is a uniquely violent society awash in firearms and other instruments of death, and a disproportionate number of them are owned by right-wing sociopaths. I'm very skeptical that political violence, once unleashed, can be effectively corralled within these very specific limits. Political violence has a fundamentally interactive quality that Malm lazily fails to account for. And under conditions of intense political contestation, it's all too easy to move from advocating violence against property to violence against people. After all, if we are fighting to prevent a global climate catastrophe, then the use of any means necessary can be justified. And we can be sure that agent provocateurs would be all too happy to encourage activists to come to such conclusions. I fear that this would create a political environment conducive not to the further growth of climate protests and official responsiveness to its demands, but vigilante counter-mobilization and an official crackdown on popular movements and the left.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I still struggle with this, even though I know we've kind of, we've had a few conversations now about nonviolence and peace and what that means and the efficacy of nonviolence, like staunch nonviolence as a strategy, including resisting forms of action like this. And I know that this is one of the arguments is that that violence begets violence effectively. And so I guess if you accept that this is a form of violence, albeit an acceptable one, then you would still have to expect that your opposition will come back with a less acceptable, perhaps, form of violence directed our way.
Well, we see that in the film, right? I mean, yeah, Logan gets shot in the arm, and when they surrender themselves to get arrested, I thought that was quite an intense moment. The two women are on their knees with their hands behind their heads, saying, "We are not armed. We submit ourselves.
We're surrendering peacefully.
We're surrendering." And a cop just whacks them across the face with a baton, right? Yes. I mean, I think there's an argument to say it's not impossible to imagine, a more active climate movement that takes on sabotaging infrastructure, being able to do that guided by a philosophy of not hurting human beings. I think I think we've seen, there's a long tradition of this kind of activism and direct action guided by principles in which, it's key to them to not hurt people. I think it's possible to imagine a form of climate action in which is motivated by saving the planet and saving the billions of lives on this earth from climate disaster, acting in a way that is conscious of not hurting, humans and animals. I think it's certainly possible to do. And if you want to talk about the response of cracking down with violence against protesters, well, welcome to the status quo, my friends. People spray,
that's true. I mean,
spray paintings that can be removed and they're sent to prison for fuck's sake. It's already happening because people are, drawing outside the lines and are taking new and novel approaches and are slightly upsetting the order. So, how much worse can it get?
You need to acknowledge that it is an escalation, and an escalation is an escalation. That's going to it's going to mean that things are going to heat up on both sides, but you probably also need to acknowledge that escalation is necessary of some sort. Because as you say, the status quo obviously isn't working.
Yeah. I mean, again, just look at how far the crackdown has been imposed. How many of our rights to gather and protest are already being jettisoned in Australia when we have nothing approaching this, right? What have we got? We've got Blockade Australia, sitting on coal trucks and stopping traffic for a couple of minutes, and everyone loses their mind and they get sent to prison. And it's nothing like, blowing up actual infrastructure too. So, that kind of world of excessive authoritarian cracking down on the right to protest, that's already here, my friends. So
that's true. Yeah, it does make you think. Is the reaction because this is likely to be more effective and more impactful than what we're doing already? And I think that's probably true.
Well, because also, sorry, just the other point on this, the thing about the sabotage is that it actually has a direct effect. It's not just raising awareness or raising consciousness or drawing attention to an issue. I mean, you are actually affecting the bottom line of these massive companies, right? There is actually an economic cost being imposed by the action, which makes it a bit different, I think, than a massive rally. It is an actual serious disruption that, as you say, is an escalation, but sort of sets it apart from other actions.
Well, I mean, and it's also in actions like this, you're actually directly stopping fossil fuels from being burnt.
Yes.
I think, ultimately, under the current system, it's likely that they'll catch up and they'll probably be burnt nonetheless. But in theory, if you were able to do this kind of disruption on a broad enough scale, then you would make a real dent.
What are the people of IMDb saying about this film?
They're not so happy. Look, there are a lot of good reviews, but the bad reviews are pretty funny. Interestingly, I noticed that the featured review was a 5 out of 10 stars from Flick Lover with the heading "Shallow disguised as deep." Their review says, quote, "It is exactly what the title says. It's about a group of climate change activists that plan and carry out the disabling of an oil pipeline in Texas. The problem is that the characters are paper thin. They are just a collection of grievances and slogans, not three-dimensional people. I have watched many films like this where I may not agree with the cause or politics of the characters, but at least in better movies of this kind, I can relate or at least empathize with at least one or some of them. There is no suspense because I didn't care for the characters."
Ooh.
When you don't have empathy.
Yes, Jesus, that's kind of brutal.
Sorry, how could you not care for these characters? Like, this is the thing. It's like, clearly this is your politics here. And it's frustrating because I was like, I similarly felt sometimes like, it could have been a little bit two-dimensional or things were a little bit ham-fisted. But every review I saw that would point out some of the maybe flaws of the film was from someone who clearly had a strong ideological opposition to the film's message.
Yeah, I mean, one of the characters has leukemia, for fuck's sake, and they're doing this as a final crack. And we never
Didn't
meet
care for them.
Yeah, and we don't meet anyone who works for the oil company. There is no human face to the corporation that's operations are being disrupted, for God's sakes. What is interesting is it kind of takes the horrors of the climate crisis as kind of for read. I thought that was interesting. It's like, that's, it didn't spend much time on, how terrible is the climate crisis, sort of takes that as granted from
that's
the
true.
audience, right? It doesn't spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, we see the effects of growing up next to an oil refinery or what have you, and we generally know. But yeah, it was really kind of zeroed in on this particular action and what brings these people together. All of them animated, unquestionably by trying to do something about it.
Yeah. Sama Asker gave it 4 out of 10 and said their review is titled "Immature Vengeance Masked as Activism." I'm going to do my best to read this faithfully. It's okay. That's all that it is. It has structural and pacing issues, but it's the entire concept that's flawed. Unrelatable characters not helped by an okay adaptation, so ought all come out as entitled brats and horrible people acting like they care about the environment while they don't understand what they're doing, not caring about others' suffering. It's revenge for them pretending to be activism. I haven't read the book, but I hope that it doesn't suffer from this same syndrome. What are us?
I wrote this review, yeah.
Samaraska, that's you, Tom. That's you.
God, even in a movie, even in a fictional movie, people still have these fucking conservative, reactionary impulses. Could someone think of the oil executives that would have had to deal with the paperwork when they blew up this pipeline? What an outrage!
That's right. This is an outrage. Someone might have died because the ambulance or something. Look, if you thought 4 out of 10 was bad, Resmet gave it 1 out of 10. I liked the title of their review, which was simply, "I am really shocked to see this. ... And this, quote, "It presents a range of characters, regardless of their race or gender, who find themselves in dire situations leading up to radical social movements." I guess what they mean by regardless of their race or gender, they're just trying to say there's some interest. I don't know. There's gays in here. There's black people. I feel like they're trying to say it's a diverse cast of characters.
Right.
Anyway, The review goes on. It reveals the typical portrayal of politically indoctrinated individuals, and although I wanted to see them being swiftly imprisoned, the movie instead disguises them as pioneers and heroes. This movie is more of a propaganda piece that, instead of raising awareness about climate change, tends to provoke with destructive and inflammatory ideas. Yeah. Yep, that is what it's. That's right. Instead of raising awareness about climate change, it is intended to provoke with inflammatory ideas and destructive ideas. Yeah, if you're talking about destroying fossil fuel infrastructure, that's right. Correct.
What a great movie. And they all went to prison. And the moral is never try. Never try to change or do anything different, and just let our corporate overlords cook us all to death. The end.
Yeah. What were they like? How long do you think they were eagerly waiting for them all to be swiftly imprisoned? 2 of them were. One of them's going to die. Come on. Split the difference. Well, one of them got shot. One of them broke their leg. What more could you want?
Oh, my God.
There were a couple of reviews in The Guardian that actually were quite positive, even though so Wendy Ide's review kind of points out that it gets a bit hazy when it comes to the consequences of this direct action. And there's this brief discussion about whether, as you say, Alicia brings up, kind of the poorest people in society will likely take the hardest hit from a breakdown in supply chain of fossil fuels, but then it doesn't really get into a discussion about that much. Wendy compares it, though, to this other film, Paradise Now. I wondered, have you seen this film, Tom, or have you heard about this?
No.
I think it's a little, like, maybe 20 or so years old. I think it came out in the mid-noughties, and I'm kind of interested to watch this film now. Paradise Now, it follows the last days of 2 Palestinian friends who are summoned to fulfill their agreement to be suicide bombers for the cause and react in very different ways to the mission.
Ooh, comedy?
It sounds interesting, right?
Yeah, that sounds very interesting, yes. Yeah, and I believe Palestinian action is cited as an example by Malm in the book that I haven't read, but I'm pretty sure I read in coverage of the book. They're sort of saying that, attacking infrastructure. I believe Mandela did, or in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, destroying infrastructure was sabotaging infrastructure was part of the resistance. So these tactics have been used elsewhere. The question is whether, yes, they can also be rolled out for the climate cause. But that does sound interesting. Paradise Now, I'll check it out.
Yeah. And it seemed as though maybe there was some kind of criticism, like people were a bit split on it, and not necessarily just down the middle, because some people were like, oh, this film, this just portrays Palestinians as terrorists. It's kind of, it's not an accurate representation, or the representation that we want as Palestinian people. But I think that the intention was to, lay bare how you might, throughout the course of your life, living under a, colonial effective apartheid regime, how you might come to that point of carrying out an act of quote unquote terrorism.
See,
I'm always
up
on
like
streaming services or anything.
Yeah, it's just like the moralizing around film. It's like we know that situation exists for people, and exploring what that situation might be like for human beings. To me, that's just interesting art. I don't, even though it touches on political themes, I don't need it to be politically correct, so to speak, in order for me to enjoy it. You know what I mean?
Don't need to be PC wokeness.
It's gone mad, if you ask me. I thought this was interesting. We might finish up on this last little point, but the concerns raised by authorities, again, just the hand-wringing and pearl-clutching around this whole idea continues both in book and film form. The film raised concerns among federal and provincial agencies in North America, fearing it may inspire climate activists to resort to sabotage. A Take Action section on the film's official website includes a detailed map of pipeline locations in the United States and Canada. All right, that's funny. Come on,
actually pretty. They should include a scan of the notebook that details how to make a bomb that we see in one of the scenes. I would have found that quite helpful,
Upon the film's release in the United States, 23 federal and state entities issued a total of 35 warnings. FBI documents obtained by Rolling Stone revealed concerns about the potential for the film to inspire terrorist attacks on energy targets. The alerts mentioned the possibility of attacks or disruptions on critical infrastructure, leading to increased security measures. Law enforcement agencies were advised to monitor individuals attempting to access facilities for photography or video recording. The Alberta Energy Regulator warned that the film should not be taken lightly, urging increased surveillance and security measures by pipeline operators and licensees. I mean, again, it's just like, again, that idea of the law won't punish you, so we will. I mean, the amount of energy and concern and resources dedicated to protecting our precious fossil fuel assets, allowing these companies to continue doing something that we know is killing the planet and will lead to the end of human existence in a couple of decades, in a very foreseeable future, in the very near future, if we don't seriously, drastically change everything. That is a society gone mad, for fuck's sake.
It is. Yes, you could be protecting us and, the planet and future generations, but no, clearly, particularly the police force exists to protect, capital. That's it.
Have you heard of the play Kill Climate Deniers? Does that ring a bell?
No.
Written by a brilliant playwright, David Finnegan, who was a friend of mine. But yes, he wrote it for Griffin Theatre years ago. And Andrew Bolt, upon hearing the title of the play alone, jumped on it and had the whole production shut down.
Oh.
Again, free speech, wokeness has gone crazy and freedom of ideas.
Wow,
No. I heard a play called Kill Climate Deniers, which is a play that explores, and it portrays some eco-terrorists, storming Canberra, taking politicians captive. But it's a meditation on these same questions that we see in How to Blow Up a Pipeline. What's justified, what isn't, an exploration of the nuance of that conversation. And
but we have, would you
be justified
we've got to have
in
open dialogue about whether trans people have a right to exist, but we can't have open dialogue about that. No. That's too far.
No. Very silly indeed.
Very, very silly.
But I would recommend watching this film, particularly if you like our little show and our politics. I think it's definitely worth a watch if you've got it on Stan, or if you want to, be a rebel, an anarchist and rip it from somewhere, do that as well. If you don't want to give money to Peter Costello or whoever the fuck makes a profit out of Stan.
Who is it? He's gone now, isn't it? So who? Anyway, certainly not the journalists.
While you're on there, you could watch Tom Ballard, The World Keeps Happening, a hilarious stand-up comedy special that's fun for
I haven't seen that one. Is it any good? Should I watch it? It's good?
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Really hey, thanks for being a patron. We really appreciate you subscribing. We're very much looking forward to seeing a bunch of you probably at our live shows. And yes, I think probably by the time this comes out, there will still be tickets available for Sydney. So please, if you're going to be in Sydney on the 24th and you're not coming to the live show, why the fuck not? You're literally paying to listen to this through little earphones. Why wouldn't you pay to come and see us IRL? Look, if you can't, that's okay. We still love you. Thank you for supporting the show. If you want to help us out even more, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening now, and follow us on socials at Serious Danger AU. And I think that's it. Gotta go.
Goodbye.
Build a bomb.
Comrades.
Just kidding. Satire.
Serious Danger Australia.